Like what you see here? Then be sure to subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8, a channel devoted to the history of college football. New videos drop twice a week. Click the card in the upper right corner or the link in the description to subscribe now. And now, on with our feature presentation.
I want you to imagine this scenario in your line of work. Let's say you've been working your butt off for the last few years at this job, but you've never gotten that coveted promotion that you feel like you deserve. You want to get paid more, you want to take on more responsibility, and everything that you've done so far in this line of work has been with that in mind. Finally, after years of hard work and even some sacrifice along the way, it's official. Your boss calls you up and says, "Congratulations, you've got the promotion." Just like that, you're on top of the world. You're getting a pay raise. You're getting what you've worked so hard to obtain. And you're getting those extra benefits and a sense of stability for once, as no longer are you going to be living paycheck to paycheck. Life is good. And then, one day later, your boss calls you back in before you even start this new position and says, "Hey, we made a mistake. You're not getting the job. We actually need you back at your old position. We screwed up big time. Whoops." Naturally, you'd be pretty annoyed and frustrated at that, wouldn't you? I mean, this was a huge opportunity for you, and a pretty hefty pay raise, and your boss just gave you that by mistake? At that point, you're probably looking for another line of work, or you're calling up a lawyer, or anything along those lines, because you're understandably frustrated. However, the man that you've been watching this whole time? Well, as bizarre as this scenario is, this is California Angels pitcher Mike James, and that's exactly what happened to him, when somehow, the Angels accidentally called him up to their major league roster. Seriously, they called him up, and then realized that they didn't mean to call him up at all. And this is the story behind the incompetence of the Angels, the bizarre saga of Mike James, and the craziest call-up and promotion in the more than half-century-long history of the franchise. Before I talk about the call-up that never happened, we need some context to understand the journey that James took to get to this point, because it makes what ended up materializing that much more tragic and heartbreaking. To say that James had a long path to make it to the major leagues would be putting it lightly. He was drafted in the 43rd round of the 1987 MLB draft by the Los Angeles Dodgers out of a small community college in Alabama, and he spent years trying to work his way out of the minor league system, starting with rookie ball with the Great Falls Dodgers in the Pioneer League in 1988, then single A with the Bakersfield Dodgers of the California League in 1989, then double A with the San Antonio Missions of the Texas League in 1990, and then going back and forth between double A and triple A for a few years. The problem with James is that it seemed like he hit his ceiling around the triple A level, and was never going to make it up to the majors, especially after the 1993 season, when he was traded for outfielder Reggie Williams after a disappointing outing in Albuquerque. After some rough outings in AAA in 1991 and 1992, that 1993 season was even worse. He posted a 7.47 ERA, allowed 38 hits in 31 innings of work, coming out to an average of nearly 11 hits per 9 innings, and he was struggling mightily with control, walking an average of over 5.5 batters per 9 innings. It seemed like James had the stuff to get out of AA, but everything just fell apart in AAA as the talent improved around him. But in 1994, finally, it seemed like that was changing. Once he joined the Angels organization and played for the Vancouver Canadians in the Pacific Coast League, finally, it seemed as though James was hitting his stride coming out of the bullpen, at least to some extent. Once the Canadians moved him from the starting rotation, where he struggled, including an outing against his former Albuquerque team where he started and allowed 8 runs, to the bullpen, where he picked up saves and was effective in relief, James was finally able to get into a groove. Some pitchers are just better out of the bullpen than they are as starters, and it seemed like James was one of those. And this was especially true in August, when James was one of the best relief pitchers in the Pacific Coast League. In a 4-1 victory against the Las Vegas Stars on August 5th, with the bases loaded and Vancouver up 2-1, James was brought into the game. James not only got out of the bases loaded jam by retiring back-to-back batters, but then picked up the save. And a few days later, James pitched the final 2 innings of a 5-4 victory over the Stars, and struck out 4 batters in the process. I don't want to say that time was running out for James to make it to the majors, because obviously at 26, you've still got plenty of baseball in you. But remember, this was a guy that was drafted in 1987. He had spent close to a decade just bouncing around in the minor leagues. It definitely felt like, considering the toll that playing in the minors takes on you, considering the low pay, and considering the production, that we were approaching a point where it was now or never for James to make it to the majors and finally become a big league player. And the good news for him was that finally, after years and years of hard work, that day had come. Because after James picked up that 2-inning, 4-strikeout save, the California Angels decided that they could use him in their rotation. And with that, Mike James was officially called up to the Angels. For the first time ever, James was a big league pitcher. The odds were stacked against him. No one else from the 43rd round of that 1987 draft class made it to the major leagues. But after years of hard work, and after some struggles along the way for sure, Mike James was playing at baseball's highest level. What an incredible moment to hear that, and to get the call up. Except there was one small problem. Because as it turns out, the Angels made a mistake by calling him up. The GM of the Angels back in 1994 was Bill Bavasi, which, considering how bad he was with the Angels, and how he basically destroyed the Seattle Mariners a decade later once he took over there, probably isn't going to come as a surprise to a lot of you that he royally screwed up and had no idea what he was doing. And back in 1994, he really had no idea what he was doing. Option rules can be a bit confusing in baseball, but that's what applied here. Basically, if you're on a 40-man roster, you're given 3 minor league options, which allows that player to get sent back down to the minor leagues without having to go through waivers. Spend 20 days in the minor leagues in a given season, and you lose your option. After you lose all 3 options, the next time the major league team wants to put you in the minor leagues, they have to subject you to waivers first, meaning that any other team in baseball can pick you up and put you on their major league roster. And that was a problem, because all of James's options had been used by this point, since these options are cumulative over a player's entire career and not on a per-team basis. So the options kicked in when he was playing with the Dodgers. Now you might be asking why this is an issue if you're calling him up to the majors, since you don't necessarily intend on sending him down to the minor leagues again. Well, 1994 was the year of the strike, as on August 12th, the major league players were set to go on strike, putting the season to a halt, and eventually terminating the season prematurely, making the 1994 season the first time in 90 years that a World Series was not played. However, while Major League Baseball was going on strike, the minor leaguers were still going to be playing. That season was not impacted at all. So the idea was to call up James, have him work in the bullpen for a few days, and then send him back down to the minors during the strike so that he could continue to get some work in while that was going on. The problem was that if they decided to do that, then James would have to go through waivers, and there was a chance that he would be claimed by some other team. And somehow, the Angels' own general manager didn't know the status of his own player. It'd almost be like in the NBA if a player was signed to a 10-day contract, and then the player wasn't there anymore, and the GM was wondering why. And it's because their contract expired since the 10 days were up, and they had no idea that the 10 days were up. It's that level of absolute cluelessness. And caught in the middle of it all was Mike James. Because even though he was thrilled to finally be playing in the big leagues, and to get all the benefits from that, it was all for nothing. He spent the entire night making telephone calls to his family and friends. One report even said that because James had so little money from his time in the minor leagues, he was taking money out of his savings account to make these phone calls and informed his loved ones that the day had finally come. But when he arrived at the clubhouse in Anaheim on Tuesday, instead of going through introductions and congratulatory statements and whatnot, he was informed that he had to go back to Vancouver, for a mistake had been made, and he was never supposed to be called up in the first place. For those wondering what that means from a salary perspective, according to the Los Angeles Times, in the minor leagues, he was making about $145 a day. In the major leagues, he would have been making just under $600 a day. What he thought his salary was going to be? Yeah, it was cut by 75% because of this error on Bavasi's part. And even though James took it all in stride and laughed about the whole thing eventually, saying, "It's just another page in the book. I have no idea what's going on. All I know is that they sent for me, and now I gotta go back," Bavasi was devastated about this screw-up. And rightfully so. He just cost a player his dream and a huge salary increase, all because he didn't know the rules and the construction of his own roster, which is kinda your job as a general manager. Can't exactly be a general manager if you don't know how to manage things. Said Bavasi, "We screwed up. What can I say? I whiffed it. I don't feel good about it. I feel bad for the guy." However, as terrible as this whole situation was, at least there was a happy ending, even if it was way later than James might have expected. As you can tell from the highlights you've been watching this whole time, in 1995, finally, James got his call up to the Angels and to the big leagues. This time, it was for real. He made his debut on April 29th, 1995, roughly 8.5 months after the initial call-up that turned out to be a false alarm. Played 4 seasons with the Angels in the majors, and played in Major League Baseball all the way up until 2002, playing 2 seasons with the St. Louis Cardinals and 1 season with the Colorado Rockies. In total, James made 288 appearances out of the bullpen, and while by no means was he great, to be a 43rd round pick in the mid-80s and then play into the 21st century is quite the accomplishment. But the bizarre manner in which his career began makes Mike James live on in baseball history all these years later. So as a word of advice to all general managers out there who may be watching this video, if you're going to call a guy up, make sure you know his roster status, and make sure you know whether you're allowed to call him up or not. If you don't do your due diligence, then you screw that player over in a big way, and cost him the opportunity of a lifetime. Because in 1994, even if there may have been Angels in the outfield helping the team out, there were no Angels doing the same in the front office. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.